It's Saturday, 3:02 p.m., Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The music had stopped. The pianist's fingers hung suspended above the keys, trembling. Gasps echoed through the church like distant thunder. First from the bridesmaids, then from the guests, then from her own mother, who reached for her shoulder and whispered the question no one wanted to speak aloud. "Lindsay, where is he?" But Lindsay couldn't answer. She couldn't even blink. She stood frozen in the center aisle, veil trembling, hands clutching a bouquet of ivory roses and pale blue hydrangeas. Her father's arm had already slipped from hers. The officiant looked down awkwardly, clearing his throat. Her friends stared with pity and disbelief. Phones were already out, texting, recording, speculating. But her eyes stayed locked on one thing, the empty space at the altar. His tuxedo wasn't there. His smile wasn't there. The man she was supposed to marry wasn't there. And somehow, the silence was louder than any scream. That night, JFK International Airport. She didn't cancel the flight. She didn't cry either. She simply went home, took off the dress, packed the suitcase that had been sitting by the door, and changed into the first black outfit she could find. Her mother begged her to stay. Her sister cursed his name. Her best friend offered wine and revenge and a last-minute girls' trip to Miami. But Lindsay said only one thing: "I need to leave." Then she did. Her ex-fiancé, had booked 2 first-class honeymoon tickets to Shanghai. Non-refundable, non-transferable. Well, he could keep the ring. She'd keep the seat. Shanghai, 9:47 p.m. The air was wet with humidity and neon. Lindsay stepped out of the cab in heels that had once felt elegant, but now bit into her skin like punishment. Her hair, still curled from the night before, had begun to fall in soft, defeated spirals around her face. She had no destination, just the numb desire to disappear somewhere the world wouldn't recognize her. And so she wandered, through markets, past couples laughing in Mandarin, past red lanterns swinging in the breeze, past people holding hands like it was easy. A part of her wanted to scream. Another part just wanted to collapse. Both parts hurt. And then she reached it. The Bund. The waterfront was lined with lights, with the skyline glittering like a promise that wasn't meant for her. She walked slowly to the stone railing, trembling. She didn't mean to cry. Not here. Not in front of the world. But it came anyway. Her body gave in first, knees buckling as she dropped to the ground, one hand gripping the edge of the railing like it might hold her up, the other pressed to her face as sobs tore through her throat in waves. She couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't believe this was her life. "Excuse me." She didn't hear him at first, only the soft shuffle of shoes, the hesitant breath. Then came the sound of cloth rustling, and something warm was gently draped over her shoulders. She blinked through tears. A man, tall, calm, and silent, sat down beside her, not touching, not staring, not asking, just there. He wore a black shirt and dark slacks, and his hair was a little tousled, like he'd been walking a while. Japanese, maybe. She didn't know. She couldn't tell in the low light, but his presence felt like calm in a world that had spun too fast. She glanced at him. Do I look that pathetic?" she croaked, voice raw. He didn't answer right away. Then finally, in the softest voice, "No, you look like someone who still showed up." The words undid her all over again. Lindsay let the silence grow between them like a garden. Awkward at first, then oddly safe. She clutched the coat tighter. It smelled faintly of rain and cedar and peace. They sat that way for a long time. No introductions, no expectations, Just two strangers sharing the same ache beneath different stars. At some point, her head tilted. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in hours, she slept. The next morning, she woke with the sunrise on her face and birdsong in her ears. The coat was still on her shoulders, but the man was gone. Only a folded paper sat beside her. A sketch. It was her, sitting on the Bund, face turned away, tears mid-fall, delicate, honest, real, no name, no number, just 3 handwritten words at the bottom. You were seen. Lindsay held the paper to her chest and exhaled. Something in her cracked, but not the kind that broke, the kind that made room for something new. New York City, 1 month later. The coat stayed in her closet. She never washed it. She couldn't. It wasn't just fabric. It was the memory of a night that didn't save her, but held her together long enough not to break. Lindsay tried to move on. She tried everything. Therapy, journaling, going out, staying in. And yet, every time she closed her eyes, she saw the Bund, the river lights, the stranger's sketch. His voice, soft and quiet, echoing in her mind. You look like someone who still showed up. She wanted to forget him. She couldn't, because he hadn't just seen her crying. He'd seen her stay. 9 months later, Brooklyn Cafe. Wait, you're writing about what now? Kendra blinked over her oat milk latte. Places that saved me, Lindsay replied, scribbling in her notebook. Moments that mattered. Hidden stories in cities. Kendra raised a brow. Girl, you were dumped at the altar and turned into Anthony Bourdain with trauma. Lindsay smirked. I'm not cooking anything, just traveling. She sipped her coffee, gaze distant. What she didn't say. She'd already booked her ticket. Same destination, same week. Shanghai, Kyoto, Japan, meanwhile. Sora Kobayashi tightened his grip on the charcoal pencil. The face stared back at him from the sketch pad. Curls, distant eyes, a fragile strength. He'd drawn her a dozen times, and still, he hadn't captured what haunted him about her. Not her tears, but her silence. The silence of someone who had lost something, but still walked forward. He hadn't meant to stay that night. He was only in Shanghai for a short trip, to scatter his sister Hana's ashes into the Huangpu River. She'd asked for it before she died, someplace that looks alive at night, where you can see lights move, where time doesn't stop just because you do. He had obeyed, and on the night he fulfilled her wish, he saw Lindsay, not through a lens, not through a camera, but in the kind of way artists know is real. She's carrying something too, he thought. The morning. He left. He didn't want to wake her. She looked too peaceful. So he left the sketch, hoping she'd understand. He thought maybe that would be enough. But by the time his plane landed in Japan, he already knew it wasn't. 1 year later, the Bund again. Lindsay stood at the same spot. She wore flats this time. No tears, no desperation, just stillness. She scanned the faces walking past. Couples, tourists, street vendors. No one familiar. Still, she stayed. That night, she visited the cafe she'd stumbled into the year before when her phone died and her heart had shattered again from remembering. She bought a journal and wrote a note on the last page. To the man who gave me his coat and his silence. If you ever see this, thank you. I showed up again. She tucked the notebook behind a dusty row of travel memoirs on the third shelf, second from the right. Then she left. 2 weeks later, same cafe. Sora pushed open the door. He hadn't meant to walk in. He just needed a place to sketch while waiting for the ferry. But something quiet and deep pulled him toward the bookshelves. He scanned the titles out of habit, then paused. There it was, a worn leather journal, not a display copy, just hidden. He opened it, read the message. His chest tightened. But by the time he asked the barista, she was already on a plane back to New York. Lindsay walks through an art exhibit in Shanghai, pausing at a painting titled Solitude in the Rain. It's his. She doesn't know. Sora walks past a hotel in Shanghai where Lindsay stayed. He lingers at the check-in desk. Her name had been there the day before. Lindsay leaves a red ribbon tied to a railing at the Bund. Sora sees it. 1 week later. They sit at the same noodle shop on different nights, order the same dish, and eat it alone. 1 year later, her next book is due. Title, The Places I Went to Find Myself. Chapter 6. The Man Who Didn't Save Me, but Sat With Me Anyway. She stares at the blank page. Her eyes burn. Then she begins to type, Some people don't leave footprints. They leave shadows in the shape of peace. He was one of those people. And somehow, I believe, he remembers too. Shanghai, Year 3. The cafe had no name. Not one in English anyway. It was tucked between a calligraphy shop and a florist that sold wilted orchids with more charm than beauty. Most people passed it by without a second glance, but Lindsay noticed it. Again, like always, it called to her. It wasn't the coffee. It wasn't even the cozy lanterns or the glass ceiling with creeping vines. It was something else, something quieter. It felt like a place people came to leave pieces of themselves. She ordered jasmine tea and sat in the corner, next to the bookshelf. Her notebook was in her lap. Her pen hovered over a page she'd ripped out carefully, so it wouldn't leave a jagged edge. She hesitated, but then she folded the paper twice, tucked it inside a book titled Bridges of Light, and slid it back on the shelf. 3rd row, 2nd from the left. She stood up, took one last look at the book's spine, then whispered, Goodbye. No one saw her leave. The note, to the man who sat with me by the river. You probably don't remember, but I do. I still do. That night, I had nothing left. No ring, no name, no reason. And then you came. You didn't say much. You didn't try to fix it. You just gave me your coat and your silence. Somehow it was enough. If this ever finds you, thank you. I still remember. Lindsay. 3 days later, same cafe. Sora walked in with paint on his hands. His sketchbook was nearly full, his mind cluttered with outlines and commissions that didn't matter. He only had 2 days left in Shanghai, and he still hadn't found her. Again. He sat in the same corner where she once had, not because he knew, just instinct. He reached for a book randomly, looking for distraction, and pulled out Bridges of Light. The page fluttered loose and fell to the floor. He picked it up, read, and everything stopped. To the man who sat with me by the river. His hands trembled. His chest tightened like someone had pressed a thumb to his ribs and whispered, Found you. He looked up at the cafe owner. This note. When was this book returned? The woman behind the counter shrugged. Some foreign lady. Pretty hair. Left a few days ago. He exhaled. Too late. Again. But this time, he had something. A name, a message, a reason. Kyoto, 2 months later. Sora locked the studio door and peeled off his gloves. Canvas stretched before him. Empty. Quiet. He stared at it for a long time. Then he took a pencil and began to sketch. Not her face first, but her posture. The way her shoulders had curled inward the night he found her. The way her hand had clutched the stone railing. The defiance and despair that coexisted in her eyes. Then the softness in her cheeks as she finally slept beneath the Shanghai stars. He painted all of it, layer by layer, until she lived again on the canvas. No caption, no signature, just the title in small red script at the bottom, The Woman on the Bund. New York, late autumn. Lindsay had stayed up late, chasing deadlines and editing articles she no longer believed in. Her latest piece, How to Fall in Love with a City When You Hate Yourself, was due by sunrise. She opened her browser and distracted herself by scrolling through an art site her friend had sent. 10 unknown artists to watch this year, featuring Japan's elusive painter known only as K. She clicked and stopped breathing. There, number 4, was a portrait. Her, hair curling in the mist, tear trailing down one cheek. Her head bowed but not broken. The caption read, Unnamed Woman, Shanghai, Bund Riverfront. The article continued, No one knows who she is. The artist refuses to give interviews. This painting has captivated thousands who recognize in her something deeply human, an echo of grief, hope, and healing. Lindsay touched the screen with her fingertips. It was like staring into a memory through someone else's eyes. And yet, somehow he had seen her more clearly than anyone ever had. Her breath caught. Then she smiled. Tears welled up, uninvited but welcome. He remembered. Kyoto Gallery, 1 week later. A woman walks past the woman on the Bund at a quiet exhibit. She stares for a long time. She asks the curator, Did the artist ever explain why he painted her? The curator smiles gently. No, he just said, Some people only exist for a moment, but you carry them for a lifetime. New York, April, year 7. Lindsay stood at the window of her Brooklyn apartment, watching the rain slip down the glass like tired tears. The city outside looked gray, not stormy, not tragic, just worn. She sipped from a mug of lukewarm tea and didn't flinch when her best friend's voice cut through the phone speaker like a protest. You're seriously not going this year? Lindsay said nothing, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she finally did. I'm tired, Jazz, she murmured. I've gone back 6 times, every year, same streets, same week, same hope. And I come home with nothing but receipts and an ache I can't explain. Jasmine's breath caught. You saw the painting, though. Lindsay nodded. That was 2 years ago. But it was you. I know. So don't you want to know why he painted it? Why he remembers? Lindsay shut her eyes. The question was too raw. Hope is exhausting, she whispered. Waiting on a stranger. It hurts in places I didn't know existed. Jasmine was quiet for a beat, then said softly, Then don't go for him. Go for you. Go. To remember the woman you were when you sat on that river's edge and still believed love could show up, even if only for a night. Lindsay pressed the mug to her lips again, heart fragile and tired. And then Jasmine added gently, Just one last time. Kyoto, same da. The studio smelled like turpentine and dust. Sora sat in the center of it, surrounded by unfinished canvases and unopened letters from galleries around the world. Invitations, contracts, praise. All of it felt like noise now. He stared at the woman on the canvas, the one he'd painted again and again, never quite the same, never quite right. In one version, she was smiling. In another, crying. In the most recent one, she simply looked tired, like him. His doctor had called it burnout. His sister would have called it grief left to rot in the soul. Maybe if I stop painting her, he whispered to no one, I'll forget. But he wouldn't. He knew that. And that's what scared him. He hadn't been back to Shanghai in 2 years. The last time he'd stood by the Bund, he felt like an imposter, haunted by memory, chasing a ghost in a city that never promised answers. He'd almost sworn never to return, until that morning. When the sun came up in slow gold over the hills of Kyoto, and he looked at his easel with the strange sensation that he'd left something undone. Not art, not obligation, closure. He pulled the drawer open and stared at the ticket he never threw away. April 18th to 25th. Same week, same city, same ache. Sora let out a breath and whispered, just one last time. 3 days later, Shanghai airport. Lindsay tugged her suitcase behind her through customs, sunglasses hiding her swollen eyes. Jet lag, or something deeper. She didn't text Jasmine, didn't post an update. This trip was quiet. No fanfare, no expectations. She'd promised herself she'd just walk the streets, drink some tea, maybe visit the cafe one more time, and then go home. No Bund, no notes, no him. Meanwhile, just a few terminals away, Sora stood in line at a taxi stand, rubbing the back of his neck and wondering why everything felt familiar and unfamiliar at once. Shanghai had changed. He could feel it. But what hadn't changed, what never did, was the hum under his skin, as if the city itself remembered them both. April 21st, day 4 in Shanghai. Lindsay walked past the Bund. She didn't stop. She saw the river, the stone railing, a couple sitting exactly where she once wept in a wedding dress with mascara like war paint. She turned away, but something in her paused. She touched the inside of her wrist, the red bracelet Jasmine had given her years ago. For hope, Jasmine had said, even if it's hanging by a thread. She stood still, and then she turned back, not for long, just long enough to see the place again, to thank it. She didn't notice the man 2 blocks away, paused outside a convenience store, watching the Bund as he finished a bottle of water. Sora. Their paths had aligned again. Just not yet. That evening, Sora returned to the same cafe. He didn't know why. He ordered Jasmine tea, sat in the back, opened a sketch pad, then paused. A shadow moved past the window. A woman, head bowed, curly hair, a black coat. He stood quickly, stepped outside. She was gone. But for the first time in years, he felt something flicker in his chest. A pull, a presence, or maybe just a beginning again. If you're still here, I came back. Lindsay's journal, entry 79. People think love is loud, that it shows up with fireworks and roses and movie moments. But sometimes, love is a whisper on a street corner, a breath you almost recognize, a glance that doesn't quite find yours in time. Sometimes, love is almost, and almost breaks you quietly. Day 1, sunrise at the Bund. Lindsay stood at the railing as the first hints of morning touched the water. Pale gold filtered through the haze, lighting the skyline with a soft defiance. Shanghai waking slowly, like a promise she no longer dared to believe. She wore the red string bracelet again, tucked under her sleeve, not for hope this time, for memory. Beside her sat a cup of warm soy milk and a bao bun she hadn't touched. She breathed in the silence. No one came. Behind her, the city stirred. She stood there for 27 minutes, then walked away. Day 1, sunset at the Bund. That same evening, Sora arrived. He hadn't meant to. His feet simply carried him there, past the metro station, through the quiet streets, beneath a bridge blooming with pink graffiti, and past vendors closing up their carts. He stopped at the exact spot where he first saw her cry. He didn't know she had stood there that very morning. He only knew the wind felt familiar, and the ache in his chest had rhythm again. He took out his sketchbook. This time, he didn't draw her face. He drew his own, sitting beside a ghost. Lindsay's journal, entry 81. I told myself I wouldn't go to the gallery this year, but I did, because part of me still hopes I'll turn a corner and see him. Not as a painting, not as a memory, just him. Day 2, afternoon at the gallery. Lindsay strolled the exhibit slowly, heart guarded but eyes wide. The gallery was quiet. Few tourists this time of year. The painting, the woman on the Bund, was still there, though now surrounded by 2 newer pieces, April Silence and Flicker. She studied them, goosebumps rising. She could feel him in the strokes, the aching detail, the way he painted water, not just as water, but as longing. She lingered for a while, wrote a small anonymous comment in the guest book. You remembered me once. I came back too. Then she left. Day 3, morning at the cafe. Lindsay took a seat near the bookshelf, fingers brushing the spines out of habit. She sipped her tea, eyes drifting to the entrance. No one came in that looked like him. But a child laughed. A couple argued softly. A man proposed to his girlfriend at the back table. Lindsay smiled sadly. Love is brave, she wrote in her journal. It shows up, even when it doesn't know if anyone's waiting. Day 3, evening at the same cafe. Sora stepped inside just before closing. His coat damp from the drizzle, his hands cold. The barista recognized him instantly. Your usual? She asked in Mandarin. He nodded, sat in the same corner, pulled out his sketch pad. As he flipped pages, one fell loose. An old sketch of her crying on the Bund, the original. He didn't tape it back in, just looked at it for a long time, then quietly asked the barista, Has anyone been drawing in the guest book lately? She blinked. Some foreign lady came in yesterday. Pretty, quiet, looked sad. Sora's hands went still. She was here. Lindsay's journal, entry 83. I believe the universe has a cruel sense of humor. Because I know he's near. I feel it, like catching the scent of someone you once loved in a crowd. You turn, you look, you hope, and nothing. Next day, Lindsay walks down East Nanjing Road with earbuds in, passing the same bookstore where Sora is browsing inside. Later that day, Sora stands in front of the red bridge near Suzhou Creek, watching paper lanterns float. Behind him, Lindsay passes on a bike taxi, turning her head at the last moment. But too late. Lindsay leaves the cafe just 5 minutes before Sora walks in again. Her half-finished tea is still warm. The river's edge. Lindsay sits on a bench overlooking the river one last time before her flight. She doesn't cry. She just breathes. She whispers to the wind, I hope you're well, wherever you are. Unseen. 3 blocks away. Sora stands at a different railing, sketch pad in hand. He whispers, I hope I find you before it's too late. New York City, autumn. The city had begun to blush. Leaves fell like soft confessions. Brownstones wore golden crowns, and the wind whispered the names of seasons that were always passing, but never quite gone. Lindsay tucked her scarf tighter as she stepped into the museum. She didn't even know why she came. A friend had messaged her the flyer. Traveling exhibit, Faces I Never Forgot, by Japanese painter Sora Kobayashi. The name tugged something in her chest. It couldn't be him. It was too far, too long, too late. But curiosity had a way of feeling like fate in disguise. So she came. Inside the gallery, the walls were white and still. Soft instrumental music floated from hidden speakers. Visitors moved slowly, as if each step might disturb the stories hanging in silence. Portrait after portrait, unnamed faces, some laughing, some crying, all unforgettable. She wandered quietly, absorbing the intimacy of brushstrokes. Whoever the artist was, he didn't just paint people, he remembered them. One piece in particular caught her attention. A woman with tear-stained cheeks and windblown curls, sitting cross-legged in a rain-soaked alley. The caption, Hikari, the day she walked away from him. Lindsay exhaled slowly. Her fingertips ached with memory. She didn't rush. She moved room by room, letting the exhibit unfold, until she reached the final wall and stopped breathing. There it was, her, but not the her the world saw. Not the polished writer, not the jilted bride. This was the woman from the Bund. The way her eyes looked just before she fell apart. The way her lips parted like she wanted to scream but didn't. The soft tremble in her chin. The stubborn grace in her spine. It was her, but seen. Titled in red script beneath the frame. The woman who changed my life. She blinked, mouth trembling open. No one could have known. No one but... I wondered if you'd come. Her breath caught. Her shoulders stilled. She turned, and there he was. Sora. He looked older, but not worn. His hair was longer, tucked behind his ears. His voice was still velvet and steady. He stood just a few feet behind her. No fanfare, no cameras, just him. Lindsay couldn't speak at first. Her throat tightened. Sora stepped closer, gently, like approaching a wild thing you weren't sure would stay. His eyes softened as he looked at her, and then, I kept coming back, he said, to Shanghai, to the Bund, to that cafe. I didn't know why I couldn't let it go. Lindsay let out a shaky laugh, blinking through the tears rising quickly. Sora stepped forward, gaze locked to hers. You waited for me. Her lips trembled. I didn't know I was, she whispered. Silence, not empty, full, of everything that hadn't been said in 7 years. Of every almost, every missed glance, every heartbeat that turned the corner too late. And then, Sora took something from his coat pocket, a folded paper. He handed it to her. Lindsay unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was her note, the one she had left in the cafe 3 years ago. To the man who sat with me by the river. I still remember. You found it, she breathed. I never stopped looking. Outside the gallery, they stepped into the autumn air together. No rush, no plan. People passed them. Cars hummed. The wind tugged gently at her coat. Lindsay looked up at him. What happens now? Sora smiled, the kind that begins in the soul. I stop painting shadows, he said softly, and I start living the story. He held out his hand, not demanding, not assuming, just offering. Lindsay took it. For the first time, not by accident, not by fate, by choice. Shanghai, after the exhibition. It wasn't a date. It wasn't a reunion either. It was something quieter, heavier, more sacred. Lindsay met Sora at the old cafe that morning, the one with the vines on the ceiling and the dusty shelf where she'd once left her heart folded between pages. The barista smiled knowingly and handed them their drinks without asking for names. Jasmine tea for her, black oolong for him. They sat at a corner table by the window, and for a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full, like they were both still catching up to the fact that this was real. Finally, Lindsay looked up. 7 years, she whispered, her fingers circling the rim of her teacup. That's how long it took for me to believe you were real. Sora gave a gentle smile. I wasn't sure I was either. They walked through the alleyways, soaked in nostalgia, past noodle shops and lantern-lit balconies, past bookstores, street performers, a child chasing pigeons barefoot, side by side, never brushing hands, but always near enough to feel each other in the air. Lindsay broke the silence first. I came back every year, she said softly, and every year, I promised myself it would be the last. Sora nodded, eyes forward. Me too. Why did you keep coming? He paused at the edge of a quiet alley, the kind with red-painted doors and drying laundry strung overhead like flags of someone's quiet rebellion. I think, he said, because you were the last moment I felt something that didn't come from pain. He looked at her, his eyes not pleading, just honest. You were my reason to hope. Lindsay blinked. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. Only warmth in her chest and a slow ache beneath her ribs. After a moment, she said, I never even knew your name. He smiled. Sora. She repeated it quietly, like a prayer. Sora. And you? Lindsay. Another pause. Then, a soft laugh from both of them. All this time, she said, shaking her head, we chased shadows without even knowing each other's names. I knew your face, he replied. I remembered your silence, the kind that didn't ask for pity, just space. Her throat caught. That night, she said, I didn't want to live, not to die, but not to go on. I just wanted time to stop. And you didn't try to fix me. You just sat. I didn't know how to fix you, Sora said gently, but I knew how to stay. They stopped at the edge of the Bund, the same place. 7 years later, the railing was still cold beneath her fingers. But this time, she wasn't crumbling. She wasn't waiting. She was choosing. They sat on the same bench, only now, their shoulders brushed. The skyline sparkled ahead of them, soft and defiant. Sora reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. Not the note, a sketch. Of the two of them, sitting together, not alone anymore. I drew this after the night I saw you, he said, but I could never finish it. Lindsay touched the corner of the sketch with gentle fingers. Maybe now you can. He turned to her. Only if you'll help me. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Yes. They sat together as the city lit up around them. No pain, no apologies, just peace. Lindsay leaned her head against his shoulder and whispered, We're not late. We're right on time. Sora closed his eyes, and for the first time in 7 years, he believed it. Kyoto, Japan, 1 year later. The sound of the rain was gentle against the paper windows. It had rained the morning she arrived in Kyoto 1 year ago. Still aching, still unsure, still carrying a heart full of questions and red string memories. Now, the rain felt like comfort, familiar, welcome. Lindsay sat at her writing desk in a sunlit corner, barefoot and wrapped in a loose sweater. Her laptop was open, but she wasn't typing yet. Across the room, the smell of paint and orange peel drifted from Sora's side of the studio. He was standing in front of a canvas, brush in hand, sleeves rolled up, his expression calm and focused. There were 5 finished paintings behind him, all part of a new series. This one, though, this final one, was theirs. Not of a place, not of a city, of a moment. Two figures walking away from the viewer, hands entwined, the skyline in the distance, a soft red thread trailing behind them. Lindsay sipped her tea and smiled. You always wait until I'm watching to do the best parts. Sora glanced over his shoulder, smiling. That's because everything's better when you're here. He wiped his hand on a cloth and crossed the room. She met him halfway. He kissed her forehead with reverence, like it was a ritual, then said, You ready? Lindsay nodded. It's time. Shanghai, springtime. They didn't come with expectations. There was no searching this time, no aching, no hidden notes in cafes. Just memory, just meaning. Just two people returning to the place that began what they didn't know would become everything. They walked the streets slowly, arm in arm, through markets and alleyways that felt smaller now, not because they were less magical, but because they had grown. At the Bund, the city sparkled like it always did. But this time, Lindsay didn't look for shadows. She looked at Sora, and he looked back. No sketch pad, no distance, just presence. They sat on the same bench where it all began, no longer strangers. Lindsay reached into her pocket and pulled out the red string bracelet she'd once worn through all the waiting years. It was faded now, a little frayed. She smiled and looped it around the slatted wood of the bench's armrest, tying it into a loose bow. For the next person, she whispered. Sora nodded. So they know they're not alone. She stood. He offered his hand. She took it. And together, they walked down the promenade, feet in rhythm, hearts unhurried, disappearing into the Saturday crowd. An hour later, a young couple approached the bench. They were tourists, laughing, taking selfies, bumping shoulders on purpose. The girl paused. Wait, what's this? She picked up the red string bracelet, her brows lifting. Someone tied this here. The boy leaned over. Maybe it's from a proposal? She smiled, looping it around her wrist. No, I think it's something older than that. They sat down. Behind them, the crowd blurred into motion, and far off in the distance, Lindsay and Sora turned a corner, their silhouettes soft in the afternoon light. Not lost, not waiting, together. The end.